So last time we were doing the law of karma, and few things remain, few subjects remain, so I thought I will cover them. There is what is known as mass karma. Mass karma takes place when a group of people, a mass of people, they share the good or bad karma that has been performed. And this good or bad karma that has been performed is experienced by them as a group. It could be in a very large way, as you could say, global warming. So that's an example of mass karma. It could even be, plague and pestilence. So COVID-19 is an example of mass karma. When wars occur between nations, especially world wars, that is also mass karma. Individual groups also suffer what is known as mass karma. And this mass karma causes groups of people to enjoy good karma or suffer and probably suffer bad karma as a group. And if you're part of that group, if you happen to be there, then there's very little you can do. You have to experience that group karma along with it. So we have seen many examples of the Bombay bomb blasts, or we've seen examples of so many examples of mass karma. Sometimes we see airplanes that crash with a whole host of passengers. They're all experiencing mass karma. So mass karma is also experienced in large groups and also in small groups. So generally speaking, this is one good reason why to avoid mass bad karma, at least you should avoid the company of those who are engaged in bad karma on a mass scale or even on a group scale. So having explained this, I would like to reiterate here that the essential thing about group karma or mass karma is that groups and masses of people who are like-minded should stick together. This is called satsang. And the company of satsang, people engaged in pious deeds, people engaged in good deeds, working together, sticking together, living together, can only bring good. So I would like to also tell you that the whole purpose of these sessions on karma is not that you should do good karma and avoid bad karma. In fact, it is practically impossible. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that just as from a fire some smoke will arise, so also when you do good, some evil will also arise. So very often we try to do good karma, but while we try to do good karma, we also land up in doing bad karma, which reflects and comes back upon us. So it's very important that we should perform all karma as an offering unto God. And to illustrate this, I'd like to share with you an example of a time when we were with a group of people, group of doctors, who were going to villages and performing cataract operations on underserved villages. So when we were doing this, we were confronted by many senior members of the congregation who said, "How can you do this? Because don't you know that if something goes wrong, not because of your lack of care, but if something goes wrong because of bad luck, and suppose some infection comes and people go blind, then the result of your attempting to do this cataract operations on underserved people will backfire on you and it will result in very bad things." So I explained to them. I said that when we go to do cataract operations on the underserved people, what do the doctors do? First of all, when they go there, they have kirtan, they have vajan, they have discourse on the Bhagavad Gita, they have mass japa sessions. When they perform the cataract surgery, they don't say that they are performing the cataract surgery. They don't put any banners or placards of the organization or where they've come from and how great they are. They simply come there to glorify God, to glorify Krishna. The surgery is performed openly declaring that they are instruments of Krishna. And the first thing they do after the operation is over, and the first thing the person sees when the eyes are unbandaged, when the bandage is open from the eyes on the same day, is they take them to the temple and open it so that the first thing they see is God. So all the credit is given to God, and if anything should occur, and by God's grace nothing occurs that is bad, but even if something occurs by God's will that is not fortunate, that is also seen as coming from God. I'm giving you this example because the idea is not to do good and avoid evil, because sometimes you can't avoid evil. But the important thing is to do good and do that good as an offering to God. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yagnartharth karmanon yatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. All that you do which is performed as a sacrifice to please God is free of karma. Everything else that you do binds you to karma. So do good by all means. That's what we are on earth for. But do good not to earn a name for yourself, a reputation for yourself, not to get benefit for yourself, but do good as an instrument of God and perform all actions as a sacrifice to Him. Indeed, it's not only the good things we do, but in fact, everything we do should be offered to God. Yat karoshi yad ashnasi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tad kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything, Krishna says, do it for me. Shubha ashubha falairevam moksha se karma bandhane sannyasa yoga yuktena vimukto mame vaishyasi. And in this way, when you're acting in a spirit of renunciation, sannyasa yoga yuktena, when you're acting in a spirit of renunciation, you will become free from both good and bad karma. Shubha ashubha falairevam. The fruits of your labor, good and bad, you will be free of the effects of both. And thus, with freedom from karma, with freedom from prakriti, God says, you will come to me. So this is a very important part of the whole section on karma, that we need to transcend karma by acting and doing everything as an offering to God. Try to understand that karma is really the patterns of thought, speech, behavior that we have actually imprinted on our subtle body. And these patterns of behavior keep manifesting again and again and again and again in our lives. I will give you first an example in the animal kingdom, and then I will show you that reflection in the human being. Let us say, this example has been given, let us say that there is a fruit basket in one corner of the storeroom, and every night a mouse comes into that storeroom, climbs into the fruit basket, chews a little bit of the fruit that it likes, and then runs away. That's a pattern of behavior. One night, a snake comes and sits in the same basket. But the mouse, driven by his habit, driven by his patterns of behavior, comes into the storeroom, climbs into the same basket as he always did. And when he goes to bite the fruit and eat the fruit, the snake swallows him up. There was a builder who was known to us, and this builder had a son. And this son was a big bully. Why wouldn't he be? Because he was big and broad built. He was driven to car by a muscular chauffeur driver, and he had two strong bodyguards with him who took him to school and took him out of school, and they waited outside the school. Both the bodyguards stayed outside the school waiting for him. And when the driver came, they put him in the car and they brought him home. Very well protected. And this guy, big built, swollen with arrogance and pride because of the wealth and power that he enjoyed, used to act like a bully in school. He developed this behavior pattern, and he went and would hit weaker children, push them, slap them, hit them. One day his father came and took him out of school and took him to meet one of the biggest gangsters who was one of his partners in the building trade, and to whom he was probably paying protection money. And he told him, "You have to apologize." So his son said, "Apologize to whom?" So he says, "You have to apologize to his son. Yesterday you went and beat up his son." And sure enough, that gangster's son was there. And this builder's son had to apologize to him. So every day he was beating up somebody, he didn't care. But that habit pattern he developed about beating people up, bullying people, shoving people around, ultimately backfired on him, because the law of karma waits until the time is ripe. And then he went and he beat up the gangster's son. And sure enough, he was beaten up by his own father, and he was made to apologize profusely to that boy whom he had beat up the previous day. So karma works like this. We have patterns of speech, we have patterns of behavior, we have patterns of thinking, and all these patterns that we have created over not just this lifetime, but lifetime after lifetime. These patterns of thought, speech, and behavior, they actually function or manifest as our karmic patterns. And these karmic patterns that we manifest in our life, they are actually determining our destiny. To disrupt this karmic pattern, we have to disrupt these thought, speech, and behavior patterns, which are based around the idea of I, me, and myself. This is me, this is I, these are mine, and this is how I behave, this is my speech, this is my thinking, this is my behavior. And with all these, you create a sense of self. And the sense of self is what creates your karma. But when you are acting in forgetfulness of self, in remembrance of God, when you remember God and forget self, when you lose yourself in your duties and your work, in a spirit of sacrifice, those patterns are forgotten. Because you are acting not for self or for fruit, but because you are acting for God, what happens is that as you engage in your activities, you do not behave in patterns necessarily, but God prompts you from within your heart when you need to behave differently. And in this way, by constantly remembering God and forgetting self, we are able to transcend self, the patterns of the self, the karmas of the self, and we are able to act as instruments of God. Where is your karma stored? Your karma, my friends, is stored within your subtle body. You have a gross body of flesh and blood, which is Prakriti. You have a subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego, which is also made of Prakriti. And indeed, when you move from one body to the next, the soul moves from one body to the next. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatrana muyati. Just as you move from infancy to childhood to youth to maturity, you keep changing your bodies. So also at the time of death, you move to a different body. Shariram yad avapnoti yachapya utkramati ishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandhani va ashayad. The soul leaves one body and moves on to the next body, carrying with it the impressions of the previous life, just like the breeze carries the fragrance of a flower. So, what is this fragrance of a flower that it carries from one birth to the next? What is this impression of the previous life that you carry from this birth to the next? What you carry with you is a bundle of vasanas. What you carry with you is a bundle of karmas. What you carry with you is your sukshma sharir. You carry with you your subtle body. And this subtle body moves with you, with the soul, and forces the soul to take rebirth. Therefore, your soul carries its karmas. Soul carries the prakriti of the subtle body, carrying it from one body to the next. And these karmas which you carry with you, in some other faiths like Jain faith, it is also understood to be prakriti. As I'm explaining to you, it is prakriti. And they call it pudgala karma, which is an impurity which you carry with the soul. And until you shed this impurity of the karmas, until you shed the impurities of your vasanas, vasana is unfulfilled in inchoate desires. To explain it to you, when you have a desire that even you are not aware of, it is inchoate, it is unarticulated, it is unconscious desire that you are having. And that unconscious desire will not manifest until you see the object, which will suddenly spark that interest in you. So the unconscious desires you carry with you are your vasanas. When you have desires which you know but you have not yet spoken about or articulated, those desires are known as sankalpas. For example, when you are doing some havan or puja, the priest may tell you, "Aankhein band karke sankalp karo," close your eyes and make your wish. But he's telling you not to say it loudly. He wants you to say it in your mind only. Have clarity in your mind. That is sankalpa. And lastly, we declare that we want this. That's your ichha. So you have vasana, you have sankalpa, you have ichha. And what you carry from one birth to the next is your unconscious desires or your vasanas. And along with the vasanas you carry with you your whole entire bundle of karmas. All the emotional baggage that you have carried with you, life after life, birth after birth, you carry with you to your next birth as well. So your karmas may or may not be written by Chitragupt in his volumes that he writes on what people are doing and what punishments people have to receive and what good karma and bad karma you have. But definitely they are carried within your subtle body and they're carried from one birth to the next birth. Another thing that helps you besides remembering God and forgetting self and acting in a spirit of offering everything to God with the idea Om Tat Sat as Bhagavad Gita describes, that, oh Lord, this is performed for you, Om Tat Sat. Another very useful thing is to continue to perform yajna when you are not engaged in your normal yajna of work. And that is to perform, as the Bhagavad Gita says, Yajna Nam Japo Yagnosmi. It is to do japa. When you engage in doing japa, what happens? Japa interrupts your normal monkey mind, which constantly wanders to self. When I went to the Kogod Center for Aging in Mayo Clinic, I met a professor called Jones, who was a professor who was specialized on quantification of MRI signals and MRI signals of the brain. And he explained to me that what happens is that when your mind is not on anything that it is doing, it is engaged in thinking in what is known as default network, default mode network. And the brain does not work for one cell at a time, it works in circuits. And therefore, this circuit wherein you constantly think of self is called default mode circuit. Now, this default mode in the brain is how you constantly repair, reconstruct, rebuild, and expand your sense of self. Because you are thinking of one thing or the other, and all of them are connected to self. Oh, maybe I should buy that car. It will look so wonderful when I drive that car. People will be impressed. Oh, why did that person say this to me? What shall I say to that person again so that I don't look small in front of that person? So these are all things you are thinking, and these things are all related to self. Oh, my son is not doing so well in class. So what will people think of me if my son doesn't do well in studies? So that's also thinking of self. All of this is default mode network. And all this is reconstructing thoughts of self. To disrupt that thought of self, you have to do japa. Because when you do japa, it interferes with the default mode network and transforms it into a network which is called task positive network. Task positive network means that in actual fact, you are thinking of doing something. You're engaged in doing something. And when you are doing something and you're engaged in uh, chanting God's name, it's like trying to hear a radio station. Now, of course, we have FM. But in the old days when there was AM radio and you tried to tune into the music, you would hear the static noise, which would disturb the sound that was coming from the radio. You could neither hear speech nor you could hear music from that radio, as long as the static went on. Chanting the name of God helps you to remember God, and it also acts as a static to make you forget self, because your default mode network does not get engaged in reconstructing, repairing, expanding your sense of self. And as you keep chanting and as you keep acting in a spirit of sacrifice, offering everything to God, your sense of self will gradually become less and less. It will become attenuated, it will become weakened. And as your sense of self becomes less, it becomes attenuated and weakened, you will automatically experience tremendous peace. You will experience tremendous peace. And this tremendous peace that you will experience will continue to last as long as you are acting in a spirit of remembering God and forgetting self. Through your work, through your duties, through everything that you perform, and also through the performance of yajna or japa. So in this way, we will transcend self. And when we transcend self, we automatically transcend karma. When you are remembering God and forgetting self, that self which is created out of Prakriti, that false ego which is part of Prakriti, you are bringing about a dissolution of your subtle body. And this dissolution of your subtle body will so work that while you're working in the world, you will not feel the pinpricks of life. You will not feel the slings and arrows of misfortune. You will remain in a state of equanimity of mind, free from reactive emotions. Dukheshu anudvigna mana sukheshu vigata spriya vita raga bhaya krodha stitidi muni uchyate. When there is cause for sorrow, you will not be depressed. When there is cause for joy, you will not be excited. You will be free from attachment, fear, and anger. You will be a sage of steady wisdom. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatmaha samahitah sitoshana sukha dukheshu tatha man apmanayo. When you transcend, when you conquer the mind, God is already reached. For him, heat and cold, joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, they're all the same. Surin mitrari udasina madhyastha dvesha bandhushu sadhushva picha papeshu sama buddhir vishishate. You look upon saint and sinner, friend and enemy. All of them you will look upon with equal vision, with equanimity of vision. You will see even a rock and a piece of gold, sama lostrashma kanchanaha. You will see them with equal vision. You will become free from reactive emotions, and you will have the freedom to use proactive emotions whenever they are appropriate to fulfilling your job, your duty, and the needs of the moment. So I think we have concluded the session for today. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Who is taking the questions today? If you have access to the chat, you can also address them on the chat to me. No one there to tell me the questions that have been asked. You can ask them directly on the chat. If you have access to the chat, you can ask directly any questions you have. Well, there doesn't seem to be anybody asking any questions. This is a question from Purba, and she is saying, can this japa be done while being engaged in worldly pursuits? Of course, nowhere does Bhagavad Gita actually give the path, the preferred path, as being away from worldly pursuits. Sannyasas karma yogascha nihashrayasya kara ubhav tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. There are two paths that lead to salvation. One which involves giving up the worldly activities or worldly pursuits, and the other which is engaging in worldly pursuits in union with God. And this, working in the world, apparently engaging in worldly pursuits, while being devoted to God and offering everything to Him, is by far the preferred path. So your japa can certainly be done while being engaged in worldly pursuits. And it will not only calm your mind down, but it will stop you from becoming interested or moved excessively by what worldly pursuits most people are engaged in. Your mind will become quiet and peaceful. You will be less attracted to foolish pursuits that people engage in the world. You will do your duty in a spirit of dedication, in a spirit of desiring to do actions for perfection without being concerned with the fruits that you get. But at the same time, you will use your time which you have, which is your, shall we say, uh, free time. And you will use your free time in chanting God's name and in remembering Him. And when it comes time to engage in worldly pursuits, you will drop your japa and engage in worldly pursuits. But those worldly pursuits will be your duties, and you will offer them to God in a spirit of dedication. And through your work, you will remember God and forget Him. So certainly you can live in the world and engage in doing japa also. Any other questions? Any other questions? Does it answer your question? All right, then we will conclude today's session. Hari Om. Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.